It was a summer evening in Argentina, January 13th, 2002, when 6 members of the Gill family were last seen alive. Ruben Mencho Gill, his wife Margarita, and their 4 young children, ranging in age from just 4 to 12, had just attended a neighbor's wake in the small town of Viale, nestled in Entre Rios province. After paying their respects, the family returned to their home, a quiet, remote ranch called La Candelaria, and from that moment forward, they were never seen again. No phone calls, no letters, no visits, no sightings, not a single trace. For nearly 3 months, no one raised the alarm. Not a neighbor, not a friend, not even their employer, Alfonso Goet, the powerful and reclusive man who owned the ranch they lived and worked on. When he finally did speak up in April, his explanation sent a chill down the spines of investigators and family members alike. According to Goethe, he had generously given the entire family a 3-month vacation, the first and only time he'd ever done such a thing. And now, as April came to a close, he claimed he was simply surprised they hadn't come back. It didn't take long for the Gill family's relatives to see through the story. The Gills didn't own a car, they had very little money. Margarita hadn't even collected her final paycheck from her job as a cook at the local school. Their clothes, their belongings, their personal documents, all were left exactly as they had been. Nothing was missing, except the people. And that's when the question took root. How does an entire family just vanish from the middle of nowhere? And why did no one seem to notice? Ruben and Margarita weren't strangers in the community. Ruben, known to most as Mencho, was a quiet but hard-working man in his 50s. Margarita, about 30 years his junior, was kind, responsible, and deeply devoted to her children. Their lives weren't luxurious, but they were stable. The family lived modestly on La Candelaria, the sprawling 500-hectare ranch they managed for Alfonso Goet. They raised crops, tended to livestock, and worked the land year-round. They had no known enemies, no record of conflict, except one. Ruben had been in the middle of a legal dispute with Goethe over unpaid wages, and that, many believe, is where the trouble began. As the investigation slowly unfurled, the deeper it went, the darker things became. One of the first unsettling discoveries was made by Ruben's sister Louisa when she visited the ranch after hearing Goet's strange story. The family's house was eerily quiet. Their mattresses were gone, burned according to Goet. He claimed they were stained with blood. Bloodstains were also found on the dirt floor, faint but visible. No effort had been made to report this, let alone explain it. Police were eventually called, but the first search of the ranch was little more than a formality. The officers who visited were reportedly treated to a meal by Goethe, after which they left without conducting any meaningful inspection. No dogs, no equipment, no urgency. Months passed, leads dried up, and the question that had begun as a whisper now echoed across Entre Rios. What happened to the Gills? By the time authorities returned to La Candelaria for a proper search, a year had gone by. It wasn't until 2003 that forensic experts began lifting floorboards, digging in the soil, and scanning the surrounding land. When they sprayed luminol, a chemical that reacts to even trace amounts of blood, it glowed in multiple places. Blood had soaked into the ground beneath where the family slept, but the samples were old, degraded, too degraded to extract DNA, too damaged to prove who it belonged to. There were no bodies, no bones, just silence. Investigators expanded their search beyond the house. They brought in cadaver dogs. They scanned wells and barns and brushland. They used drones to capture aerial imagery, cross-referencing it with older satellite images to detect signs of disturbed Earth. They drained ponds, excavated dozens of sites, even brought in Argentina's elite forensic anthropology team. Still, no trace. In one bizarre twist, they discovered a stash of nearly 3,000 diapers buried in a nearby well. No one could say why they were there. They didn't belong to the Gill children, none of whom were infants at the time. It was just another piece of the surreal puzzle. But while the ground gave no answers, suspicion was firmly rooted in one man, Alfonso Goet. Goeta was the last known person to see the Gills. He was the owner of the ranch, the man who burned their blood-stained mattresses, the man who waited 3 months before reporting them missing, and the man who just so happened to have a long and complicated relationship with Ruben Gill. Ruben had been in the process of suing Goet at the time of his disappearance. He claimed he'd been exploited, underpaid, and mistreated. He was trying to stand up for his rights. According to family members, Goeta didn't take that well. Goeta, by many accounts, was a controlling and domineering figure. Locals gave him the nickname El Nazi, a reference to both his harsh discipline and German heritage. He was known to enforce strict rules on the families who worked his land. He reportedly disapproved when Ruben and Margarita acquired a cell phone, seeing it as a threat to his control. And when the lawsuit came into play, the relationship soured entirely. There were other rumors too, disturbing ones. Some whispered that Goeta had taken an inappropriate interest in Margarita and that he may have fathered her youngest child. Others claimed he had threatened the family, that he was capable of cruelty, that he wanted them gone. It's not just hearsay. Goeta's actions raised red flags over and over. Just 1 week after the Gills disappeared, he had already hired a new caretaker to replace them. He never once attempted to call or contact them during their so-called vacation. When pressed, he offered vague and contradictory answers. At one point, he even suggested they might have run off to another province or crossed into Paraguay, despite the fact they had no money, no passports, and no vehicle. By the mid-2000s, Goeta had become the de facto suspect. But without bodies and without a confession, prosecutors had nothing concrete to hold him on. He remained free, untouched by law, living and working on the same ranch that had swallowed the Gill family whole. The years marched on. In 2008, a new forensic search uncovered fresh clues. More blood in the soil, more suggestions of violence, the scent of death reported by investigators, but again, no bodies. In 2015, police used drones to capture fresh views of the land. They identified areas of interest. They dug nothing. In 2018, a witness claimed he had seen Ruben digging several large holes in the weeks before the disappearance. Perhaps under duress, perhaps not. Police acted on the tip and excavated those sites. Nothing. Then, in 2022, 2 decades after the Gill family vanished, an elderly man came forward with a story. He claimed he had overheard someone, years ago, describing exactly what had happened on that ranch. Investigators followed up. They returned to La Candelaria. They searched again, and once again, nothing. The case remains open, but the last man who might have held the key is gone. In 2016, Alfonso Goet died in a single-vehicle car crash. Just like that, whatever truths he carried with him, if any, died too. He never confessed, never revealed anything, and never faced justice. For the families left behind, the pain has never dulled. Margarita's mother, Ruben's siblings, they've carried the burden of this mystery for over 20 years. They've dug, they've pleaded, they've fought. And yet every corner of La Candelaria remains stubbornly silent. The Argentine government has offered a cash reward for any information that can bring closure to this case. Up to 1.5 million pesos per person. That's 9 million pesos total. Still, no one has come forward. The story of the Gill family lingers like a shadow over Entre Rios. People still talk about it. They still wonder. How can a family of 6 simply disappear? How could a mother and father and 4 children be erased, leaving behind only faint bloodstains and ashes? What happened on that ranch? Why were they taken? And why, after all this time, has no one been able to answer? Until someone finds their final resting place, until someone comes forward with the truth, the Gill family will remain lost in the dust and silence of La Candelaria. Another case of too many questions, and far too few answers.